Hello and welcome to another Drive-In Double Feature. I'm Ryan.
I'm Nathan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before I get into anything, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/drive-in-double-feature-podcast. Just a fun little area. We have some nice little side conversation quizzes, just some fun discussions between Nathan and I, just as extra content we give to you patrons out there for supporting us. Thank you very much. If you choose not to support us, do not worry. It doesn't affect any regular content. But today, we're going to be talking about 1933's The Testament of Dr. Mabuse, and that is directed by Fritz Lang. Mm-hmm. And this movie is I think it's our first Fritz Lang movie. It's actually based off of a famous literary character, Dr. Mabuse. He is a criminal mastermind and one of Fritz Lang's last movies that he directed in Germany before fleeing.
Because the Nazis asked him to make movies for him, and he said, no, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why I wanted to watch this movie, because I was reading a discussion about something, and this movie is famous because reading the context of this movie, it is a very anti-Hitler, anti-Nazi movie. Mm-hmm. And because of that, this movie was banned in Germany during the 30s. In fact, this movie was not even screened in Germany until the 60s. And because of that, Dr. Joseph Goebbels told Fritz Lang, oh, hey, we're going to have to ban that, but we'll let you be the director of all of our Nazi movies if you stay. He's like, let me think about that. And then he fled.
Yeah, what a weird, I couldn't even imagine, this guy is obviously anti-Hitler, because he's made a few movies before that, kind of delving into that, and they're like, we don't like your movies, but you can work for us.
So, and one of the famous things that apparently was said during that conversation, though, is that Fritz Lang, he said, well, my mother is Jewish, so isn't that going to be an issue? And Goebbels said to him, we are the ones who decide who is Jewish.
Oh, geez.
So at that point, it's like, all right, then I will get out of here.
Horrible, yeah. Fritz there, I was reading, said that he left the day he got asked, but I guess if you look into it, it was more a little bit later, but it was pretty much a sign, I need to get out of here. But what's nice about him is he left and he still had a career. He moved to Hollywood and made tons of movies over here.
Had a very long career, was directing movies all the way up until the 60s. And in fact, he actually directed an American version of this movie as well.
Oh, he did?
Believe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. The Thousand Eyes, right?
Of Dr. Mabuse, yes.
Yes, yeah. I'm actually, I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but I do love Fritz Lang, because, M is an amazing movie, and so is Metropolis. Metropolis is one of my favorite movies, so, and those were all before this.
M definitely is a huge favorite of mine, and just so gripping even for the 30s as a crime movie. This one, on the other hand, is about, like I said, Dr. Mabuse. He is a criminal mastermind, quite literally a crazy man that just sits in his room and is just endlessly writing notes that starts out as gibberish and then eventually turns into instructions on how to commit these crimes. And I don't even know I don't even know how to describe what happens next, because I was not expecting it to happen in one particular direction, which we'll get into. But the movie starts out kind of there's these crimes that are leading up to that's going on, and a policeman is kind of investigating them. And at one point, the guy goes crazy, and he's not able to say what he saw or who was committing these crimes, and that's kind of how our movie starts.
Yeah, well, God, this first 5 minutes of this movie, I think, are incredible. Wow. The way, because obviously he came from silent film, because the first 5 minutes of this movie, I thought maybe this movie was silent. I was like, oh, this is the 30s.
I did too.
Because it was all sound effects, all mood. He is hiding behind, it's a scene where he's hiding, the cop, he's hiding behind the chest, and there's bad guys on the other side, and they kind of know that he's there, and it's really tense. And like I just the way it was shot and like filmed, I was like, wow, this is gripping in the first 5 minutes. This is insane, and it's so well done. That's it's crazy. And then it gets into the talking, and I do think it's still stylish, but I do think those first 5 minutes are like insanely good.
Well, getting into it, what did you think of this as a whole?
I liked it. I liked it, but I will say I don't think for me personally, I think the movie doesn't pick up until the second half. I think the first half is police procedural, and it's just a little dull. I don't know if you felt the same way.
This movie felt pretty flat for me, and that's not to say I hated it, but I kind of figured out who the main bad guy was going to be. Like it's so like incredibly obvious at one point, and even before they even do like the big reveal, or like, oh, it's this guy, and I'm like it's probably going to be that guy, and sure enough, it was, and I'm like, okay, so this movie for me moves at a really glacial pace. It's like, let me show you painstakingly of how these policemen operate, and like how they figure out who commits these crimes. And I'm like, for me, so this movie is 2 hours long. This movie could have easily been like 80 to a 90-minute movie.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it's very slow moving. Like for me, like I said, that first hour is like, especially because you know who the bad guy is. I was exactly in the same pool. I knew who the bad guy was, and the main inspector here, Inspector Lohman, who's painted as almost like a Dr. Sherlock Holmes type, I would say, where like everybody knows who he is, everybody thinks he's great.
The commissar.
Their commissar. I was thinking about the song the whole time. I had to tell you
I had the exact when you sent that to me. I was like, I had the exact same thought. I kept thinking of that song.
Yeah, but I thought he was an idiot. I
did
the whole
too.
time I was like,
this guy is
so
a buffoon.
Stupid. Yeah, and I don't think the movie thinks that. Like oh my God, I could complain about it endlessly, but the guy that you're talking about, that was crazy. He goes into the room with him and he pretends to be on the phone. He's like, hey, Inspector Lohman, are you there? And he's pretending. But anytime anyone looks at him, he gets scared and starts to sing, and he doesn't finish what he's saying. So Inspector Lohman is like, like he pretends to be on the phone with him. He's like, hey, hello. Yeah, this is me. But for whatever reason, he doesn't think to like turn around and not look at him to get him to keep talking.
Or what he could have done too, or is like, because the guy's prison door had like a little, like little peephole in it, like a little mini door. He could have just like stood outside the door and like was like, hey, look, I'm Commander Lohman. And
I was thinking that the whole time.
But his brilliant strategy is like, let me just stand here right next to him, even though he gets freaked out. And I'm like, because there is a moment of clarity when this crazy guy is talking, where he's like, oh, Commander, is that you? And then he's like, yeah, it's me. And then he turns over and he's like, oh no, Gloria.
And that part annoyed me. There's a part later in the movie where he's confronted with the bad guy, and he does like the detective trick, like, oh, because what it is Dr. Mabuse has created these testaments, and that's the name of the movie. He's created like these outlines how to create chaos in the world. And of course, the professor really likes that, and he loves him and thinks he's a genius. So the detective's like, oh yeah, I think Dr. Mabuse was an idiot. What a dummy. So Lohman there, or not Lohman, Professor Baum, he starts freaking out. He's like, no, he was a genius. Nothing was wrong with him. And Lohman is just like, okay, this is interesting, but doesn't go anywhere with it. Like, nothing happens until like an hour and a half later.
This guy and the bad guy. So Baum. Okay, so let's get into that. So, Mabuse, he's just like this old guy that's, like I said, he's a crazy guy writing all these crimes down. But then he dies, and Baum is like, oh my God, we lost one of the most brilliant men alive. He's dead. And then there's a scene which I didn't realize this was even like going to be a part of this. Like, I was expecting like a straight crime movie.
Yeah,
but
kind of like M.
Yeah, but this movie takes a very hard right into
Mhm.
like a supernatural movie where the ghost of Dr. Mabuse actually possesses Bomb,
Yeah.
and it's got these big like huge like googly eye looking things on like Bomb on like Mabuse's like dead body. I'm just like, huh? Like,
Yeah.
because what I envisioned was, and I guess that's kind of like the thing where it was like
Mhm.
he was like the doctor was taking all the writings from Mabuse and he was the one implementing them, and that's how Mabuse was able to take all those crimes for happening. But it's like, oh well, no, we can't do that. We have to make it super obvious. Like he's like, no, this doctor would never do anything like that unless he was possessed by Mabuse.
Yeah. How do they get there? It's so silly. I do like the imagery, I will say that, like whenever he's ghost, because it's like he's see-through and he hovers around. But I agree. I saw this and I was like, oh, this is a supernatural movie. I just thought it was a bit odd.
I mean, I did like the scene, but it
Yeah.
just me as a viewer, I would have accepted Bomb as the bad guy even without that scene.
Exactly. I could have accepted, oh, he just really liked what he was saying and is becoming like a student of his, pretty much. That's what I was gonna get out of it. Um,
The other main character though, there's I guess a third character, and his name is Tom or Kent. He goes by both, and
yeah.
he's kind of like a desperate guy where he was unemployed for a while, and then he's taking up with Dr. Mabuse because he's found like a job, and I always like it because he always keeps telling people like, hey, I've killed 2 guys, I'm not afraid to do it again.
It comes up multiple times, but then every time like the criminal gang is like, we're gonna kill somebody, he's like, no, I can't, I won't do it.
Yeah, and I'm like, I didn't like that character, honestly. And
He's a little boring.
I'm like, why is this guy the main character? I mean, because we don't really have a concrete main character, because it's not really Loman, it's not really Bomb, it's not really this guy. So it's like
Mhm.
the screen time's kind of split up by the 3 of them, but uh,
But
it's a whole thing, and
yeah.
that whole plot line I didn't think was necessary, but it's because so all right, so how Mabuse is able to implement these instructions is he gathers all his like underlings into a room, and behind a curtain they he like says what the crimes are, and they always tell him like, don't look behind the curtain, because if you
Mhm.
do, something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's like Wizard of Oz. It's like, don't look at the man behind the curtain kind of deal. And like, yeah, there's scenes where literally these people are just talking to a curtain, which I'll say what the reveal is now. It's literally like a speaker and like a cardboard cutout of
Yeah,
somebody, like a cartoon.
yeah, like obviously like it was not a real like if you were in like okay, like if I was in a room, you could tell if somebody's in the same room as you. If you were talking to a cardboard cutout that's stationary, not moving or anything like that,
Mhm.
you'd be like, that's
Yeah.
weird. They're not doing any movements at all.
And think about, it's 1933. The sound quality on that recording is probably garbage and does not sound like a real person is in the room, right? Like like the way that it's set up, I don't think it would sound particularly like a real person.
Well, that's true, because I mean, it's like so there wasn't tapes back then. So
Mhm.
was it just like a phonograph?
I think so. That's what it kind of looked like,
It,
which is really silly.
did Dr. Mabuse have like a recording studio where he had like a sound booth, like in talking into?
uh, and like talking in movies was new at this time, so like this was like state of the art, like brand new technology. uh I don't know, but Dr. Mabuse was a genius, so they make sure to bring that up, that he was a genius.
And he had a recording contract.
Yes, he did, yeah, with World Star Hip Hop. So
Oh
make
yeah,
sure to find his mixtape.
from Third Reich Records.
That's good. Dr. Mabuse would be a pretty decent rap name.
You know, I could see it. They discover finally it's like it's a cardboard cutout, and it's because it's Kent or Tom. He's like in the room locked up with his girlfriend
Mhm.
at the time, and then the plan is that they're going to drown them to death.
Yeah, they break the pipe and just fill the room up with water.
Yeah, well, they get locked in there forever. Like that's like the plan. It's like, oh, you're locked in this room forever, so they have to
Mhm.
bust a pipe to just explode the room open.
Yeah, and make a drain go down. I thought the practical effects here were cool because literally it looks like a drain in the middle sucking them down, and they have to fight for their life to not get sucked down by this thing.
But they break out. This scene was so stupid because after they break out, Loman and Baum are like together at the police station, and then Kent like walks in, and and Baum was like, oh, Kent, like he just like gasps, and Loman's like, do you know this guy? He's like, no. And he's like, but you said his name. He's like, no, no, Inspector, you said his name. And I'm like, huh?
Yeah, and then Inspector Loman's like, yeah, maybe you're right. I don't even know what I say.
I'm just like, oh, I'm like, my head was about to explode.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it because I like this movie. I think overall I like the style of it, the theme. I think the first half is really boring and it picks up, but I don't get the overall like endearing love because this is considered like an amazing movie.
This is considered like a Fritz Lang classic.
Yeah.
And
the mystery makes no sense to me, like, or at least how they solve the mystery.
So the only way I can rationalize it, which I don't hate this movie either. I do. Yeah. I know it sounds like I'm ragging on it a lot, but it's just because there's some funny stuff in here that by today's standards doesn't really add up. But I do think it's a well-directed movie. Fritz Lang has like a great way with atmosphere and everything, but the only thing I could think of was like they didn't make movies like this, where it's like this really like layered crime drama where you didn't really know who was the mastermind or anything like that. So I'm trying to like, okay, well, this is just like kind of like a new thing, and people were just really mesmerized it by the time, and we're kind of spoiled by a lot of other mysteries now.
Yeah, and I think there's mystique to it because it has a movie's backstory and how it was made can kind of add to a movie. And I think like the fact this is the last German Fritz Lang movie, it was banned in Germany. I think it adds like a sort of mystique, and it being like Dr. Mabuse is basically Hitler. Like he kind of like that's what's going on here. And I think having that symbolism or like that, I think that adds some interest to it for sure.
Right. So like what the symbolism is that Dr. Mabuse and his gang that's causing all this chaos is this kind of the same way like the Nazis were coming in and taking over a lot of local authority figures, and like they're like, oh no, we're the authority now, and then causing general chaos, that type of thing. And that's kind of what they're representing, and that's why the Nazi party was like, we don't really want the German people to see this movie.
Yeah.
Which made it interesting, and still watching it though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It definitely makes it like an interesting watch. I think there's a lot to look into it. Cause I mean, I know you're similar. We talk about old movies, but part of what's interesting about old movies is the history about them and stuff like that. So it definitely adds a little bit to the movie.
Yeah. I kind of look at it like this other movie called It Happened One Night, where it's like the blueprint for a lot of rom-coms. Now, if you watch it and you've seen a bunch, you're like, oh, I know how this whole movie's going to play out already, which it does, but that was the first one to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, you got to give it some credit.
Yeah, you're right. I wish I had more examples, but there's definitely other examples of that in history of like, it was the first one to do it. So like, if it's cliche to you now in the time, it was new and refreshing. So, and yeah, you're completely right with that. That main character that has the romance, which I think is so like unneeded. Yeah, the romance is so unneeded. But the girlfriend there is so okay because he admits to her, I've killed 2 people, as he brings up multiple times. And she's like, that's fine, I love you. And she's like, well, one of them was my girlfriend. I killed my ex. And then she's like, no worries, I still love you.
Yeah, she's totally okay. She's like, everyone deserves a second chance. No big deal.
Yeah, the most forgiving person. I think that was so funny.
Just in summary of what I'm thinking, like I said,
Yeah.
it's way too long in my opinion. It's like I said, it's a 2-hour movie. I think they easily could have cut out 30 minutes, cut out the romance, cut out a lot of the other scenes where it's just like police procedural BS, honestly. And I'm just like, and I think you got like a really good, like tight movie in there. Because there's so many times like I'm not like one of those guys that's like, I gotta watch all this in 90 minutes, because we've made that point before, and other times where we watch movies we're like, man, I wish this movie was longer.
Yeah, of course.
So
but
I think there's a lot to be said for getting that time in.
Yeah, but like, certain plots deserve certain times, right? Like some plots deserve like an epic runtime, and some plots don't deserve that runtime. And I don't know if this one's really worth like 2 hours. Now, I do have a question. I just thought this would be an interesting thing to talk about. So,
what's your real opinion of Hitler?
No, that doesn't get revealed till Hitler Dead or Alive too.
Oh yeah, we already had that discussion anyway.
Yeah. But so there's like this popular discussion. I heard this in my film theory class one time, that moving to talkies kind of ruined movies, right? Because silent movies is all about look and feeling, and then when we move to talkies, everything turns stationary, right? Do you think this movie would have been better as a silent movie if it would have been moodier, would have had to display maybe images without dialogue, without exposition, like it just had to show you? I feel like it would have been a lot better of a movie.
I could see it. I mean, Fritz Lang, definitely is a silent movie director. He was a part of that silent era, so he knows how to make a well-made silent movie. And I think it's kind of like, there was a lot of actors that had trouble like getting into that sound era. Not to say that Fritz Lang never made a bad sound era movie.
No. M was before this in sound, and it was great.
Right. But, there's probably sometimes it's like, oh, well, I would have liked to have made this a silent movie, but because it's during the sound era, I have to do that.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's what had happened, because I feel like it would have maybe been more interesting that way, instead of being like really stationary during its talking scenes. But it is what it is. This is what we got. And
it's a great addition to film history, but though this is not even the first version of Dr. Mabuse. This is actually this is the third movie that was actually made about Dr. Mabuse. There's actually there was 2 other versions of Dr. Mabuse from the 20s, because like I said, Dr. Mabuse is not an original character that was made.
Yeah, so he was one of those popular movie characters, maybe kind of like the Marvel of its time.
Oh wait, that Fritz Lang directed those movies too.
He did the whole Mabuse verse, huh?
That's right, the Mabuse verse.
Yeah, no, I think there's other Dr. Mabuse movies, but I think there's others that weren't directed by Fritz Lang that were made after. I think it's like that character lasted until like the 60s, maybe.
Right. So like the character is actually made by Norbert Jacques. So it's definitely has its history in there. I forget what year. It doesn't say what year, but anyway, it's he definitely was like a character that was well known, I guess, at the time. So maybe people were just like clamoring. Like, do you think people were wrapped around the block like they finally adapted the Dr. Mabuse?
Who knows? They might have. My favorite character. Hey, and I mean, you know what this character inspired? Joker in The Dark Knight. So I don't know. He was the Joker of his time.
I'm Dr. Mabuse, baby.
Yeah. That's how Heath Ledger sounded in the movie, right?
That's exactly how he sounded. Yeah.
But I think that wraps it up for this one.
Yeah. Well, do you give it a recommend, Nathan?
God, it's such a hard question. I'm gonna go with, because it's only yes or no. I'm gonna go with a no. I'm gonna say most of you, I don't think, are really gonna enjoy this. This is for a very select person, I think.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're just like a hardcore cinephile, I don't really recommend it, honestly. I mean, there's better Fritz Lang movies to put your time in, but I'm sure this is going to be sacrilege to somebody that's listening on this and be like, how dare they?
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on. Nathan, what are we going to be talking about next time?
All right, so we're moving back in. It's another week of what we call Bondzilla here at Drive and Double Feature, and the next James Bond movie. No more Sean Connery. Sean Connery is not back. We get to deal with George Lazenby with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. All right, and that isn't streaming over anywhere, but it is available for rental at multiple websites.
Sounds great. Can't wait. But if you want to just complain about our opinion about Dr. Mabuse, please send us an email over at driveindoublefeaturepodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DIDFpod. And be sure to check out the Patreon over at patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast. But until next time.